And you are welcome along to the latest edition of the special Huddle Breakdown Interview series, where today we are delighted to welcome John Muller, who is a fellow American. John, you don't know this, but the most recent interview series that we did was with Ted Knutson, another American who's invaded global football. So poor Alan's outnumbered this time with our Americanism here, America. But so John has been active in football analytics, data, was a journalist at The Athletic, and subsequently the New York Times for a brief time after the acquisition, had his own newsletter, Space, which was extremely popular prior to him becoming kind of a professional journalist. And currently he's involved in a startup called Futi, which we'll talk to him about a little bit later. So welcome, John. Really appreciate you taking the time to get all nerdy with us, talking about analytics and football data. So if you can just give our audience maybe a little bit about your biography, how you kind of got to the point of being a fellow nerd in football.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me on. So let's see, how far back do we want to go with the biography?
Well, I know you're from Texas. I read a little bit about that. So that in and of itself, even within America, is a very specific biography. But no, so I would say once you kind of post college, I think you played some growing up, but like myself, you weren't very good. But yeah,
I'm glad we have that on the record that I'm terrible at soccer. So I grew up in Texas. Played soccer like every American kid until I was about 12, and then kind of forgot about it and played other sports. But was always passionate about sports, and as an American sports fan, stats were kind of part of how I grew up. Right, I would read the baseball box scores top to bottom every single day. Right, stats were kind of second nature to me, and I wasn't really a soccer fan until in my 20s. I moved to Latin America. I lived in Mexico and Brazil for a long time. And suddenly that was the only sport, right? It was the only thing that anybody wanted to play or watch or talk about. And so I got into it, and I became a Barcelona fan simply by watching their games and realizing, oh, wait, there's a lot more going on in this game than I realized. It's not all long balls and headers and chaos. It can be a really organized and beautiful game. And I became really interested in understanding why that team in particular looked qualitatively different than the other soccer that I had watched. And so, this was around the Pep Guardiola years in Barcelona. Obviously, they were the greatest club team of all time. And I watched, every single game, rewatched every single game, breaking down the video. And then around, 2012, 2013, stats started to really enter at least some specialized, like nerdy corners of the soccer discourse. And I followed, as XG became a thing and people started to discuss, oh, like we have these basic stats. They do tell us some things. They don't tell us other things. What are they good for? How can they, enrich our understanding of the game? But I didn't really get involved with soccer data until around 2017, 2018. And at that time, I was living in New York. I was going to law school, and then I worked for a law firm up there. And I would go to MLS games, to New York City FC games with my brother. And as I got into MLS, I discovered a website called American Soccer Analysis, which is still active and still a really great resource for American soccer fans. And they had event data, which was new to me. I had never worked with, data down all the way to the like touch by touch level. And not only that, but they also had a bunch of really smart people, data scientists, PhDs, folks who were doing new and interesting things with that data. And so I learned, I learned to work with that data by working with those folks. I learned to code while I was writing Space, which was the newsletter that you mentioned. So I left in 2020. I left the law firm that I was working at, and I started this newsletter, Space, and I started writing about soccer just in ways that I found interesting. I started, my goal has always been just to understand the game as deeply as I can, to understand how it works, what makes teams good, how players play, all of the things, all the things that we have questions about. But in order to come at those things from sort of new angles and learn things that were new and interesting to me, I started working a lot more with data, and a lot of Space was, kind of large projects with data, doing coding, doing modeling things that I learned from my friends at American Soccer Analysis. Also, a lot of video work, a lot of tactics writing, and just kind of trying to bring those things together for a more holistic understanding of the game. And then around 2021, Tom Warville left The Athletic, and they tapped me up to come in at that time. So I was a senior football writer for The Athletic UK from 2021 until last year, and doing, some similar things to what I did for my newsletter, although not at the depth and the nerdiness that I was able to do independently. And last year, I left The Athletic because a good data scientist friend of mine, Mike Imburgio, who created the Davies model. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that. But he and I had worked together on American Soccer Analysis goals added model, which is a possession value model. And I'm sure we'll talk more about that down the road. And then he had created Davies, which was sort of a model on top of that model that essentially just helped rate players. And when he created Davies, that was his path into data consulting for clubs. He's worked for clubs in, I don't know, 6 or 7 countries now. And he wanted to go into soccer full time. I wanted something new and interesting after The Athletic. And so we created this company, Futi, together. We've been developing a live score app that's sort of next generation. And my frustration with soccer stats is that they're kind of stuck 15 years ago, right? At least for fans. A lot of interesting things have happened in soccer data in the last 10 and especially the last 5 years that just really haven't made it to fans yet because it's difficult and it's expensive and nobody's quite found the business model for it. And our thesis is that we can take basically what every single club is trying to do right now. We can build the same models, we can build better ones, and we can put them in a live score app, which is the one app that everybody uses, right, to check stats and scores and keep up with the game. And we can bring sort of that new era of soccer data analysis to fans.
So basically, to summarize that real quick, and then I'll pass it around. You're looking to kick FOTMob's butt. That's the Footy business model. Is that accurate?
Listen, we have tremendous respect for FOTMob and SofaScore and OneFootball, whatever app you use. Like those are great apps, but the data is still basically the same thing that you would have seen on Who Scored in 2010. So what we want to do is bring club quality analytics into an app like those, and then build on that.
Great.
So I do want to get into all of that because obviously it's fascinating. But I'm also interested in your sort of journey and your development as a sort of analyst of football and a thinker about football, really, because you've kind of certainly humbled me a lot in the sense that it was probably only about 10, 12 years. Well, no, that's maybe 10, no more than 15 years ago, let's say, and I'm a lot older than you, I think, John, that I actually started to think about football and ask the questions in my own mind that you clearly started out as a young man in Latin America with no background really in football at all, and you wanted to understand it at a very sort of fundamental level what is going on. I only really started to ask myself those questions having played it and watched it and been a fan and so forth. And it was actually by watching my kids play and trying to help the coach out that got me to try and think about what is actually happening here and why is it happening and what are the dynamics, etc. So I'm interested in when you were watching Guardiola's team in sort of 2011 or what have you, and like you say, the data revolution hadn't really gone public yet. What was your kind of framework for thinking about these things? What were the frameworks that you used in your mind to frame the questions that you wanted to know the answers to? I'm fascinated by that.
That's a good question. And again, this is 15 years ago, so it's hard to put myself back in that like sort of soccer novice, just trying to understand why does this soccer look different from other soccer. But I think that, I came at it with the knowledge of football and baseball and basketball and the sports that I had spent more time, immersed in as a fan. And I think that you see that a lot in data analytics and sports analytics. People will import, understandings and ideas from other games. People who are more knowledgeable basketball fans than I am, in particular, I think have
We hope you enjoyed this free preview from all of us here at the Huddle Breakdown. We know you have options and we really appreciate you tuning in. To hear the rest of this episode and for much more Huddle Breakdown content, head on over to www.huddlebreakdown.com. We hope you consider subscribing. Thank you.